All right, so we're going to talk about the 1980s and 1990s. This is when I was a kid and a teenager. All right, so the election of 1980 was between Republican Ronald Reagan and Democrat incumbent Jimmy Carter. And so Ronald Reagan had been the governor of California, and he was also formerly an actor. And he wins pretty overwhelmingly in the 1980 election, as you can see by the election map. All the red states are the states that Reagan won. All right. The election in 1984 was between, again, Ronald Reagan and now Walter Mondale. Now, Walter Mondale was the vice presidential nominee under Carter. But we are making history this year because Geraldine Ferraro, this lady right here, was the first woman to be on a major ticket for the White House, and that was in 1984. And Reagan won. So Reagan appointed 3 justices while he was in office. He put the first woman on the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor, and William Rehnquist and Antonin Scalia. The Challenger blew up in 1986. It was a shuttle that was going to space, and it had, civilians on board. A teacher was on board, and it exploded about within 90 seconds of takeoff. And it was a problem with the some things called the O-rings that malfunctioned, and it exploded and killed the astronauts on board. The election of 1988, again, you see the Republican nominee won pretty overwhelmingly, did pretty close on the popular vote, but won the electoral vote. So it was George H.W. Bush who was Reagan's vice president, and he ran against Michael Dukakis. Now, one of the things that happened under Bush's administration was Operation Desert Storm, or the Persian Gulf War. Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and we were like, we can't have that. He's a bad guy, so we send troops in. And it's a relatively short war, about 8 months that we actually fought this war. And the war was very different because our fatigues, instead of being the army green and black and brown, which we normally see when we think about camo, they're actually these kind of colors, these kind of beige colors, because we're fighting in the desert. And really, we weren't so much fighting Saddam Hussein as we were fighting for our oil interest. So the election in 1992, was between Bill Clinton, who was the governor of Arkansas, the incumbent Democrat, and the incumbent George H.W. Bush, Republican, and Ross Perot, who was this Texas oil guy who was running as an independent. And Bill Clinton wins the 1992 election. A lot of cultural stuff that happened in the 1980s. MTV launches, and when it first started, it was just music videos. New Coke, if you've watched Stranger Things, they talk about New Coke. It was they put that out in 1985, and they quickly pulled it from the shelves because it was not popular. It was not good. The Simpsons is one of the longest running TV shows in history, and it started in 1987. And you could not call someone a crackhead before 1988 because crack was not a street drug until 1988. Y'all were trying to bring back a lot of the questionable fashion things of the 1980s and 90s: ripped jeans, acid wash, mullets. Movies were really geared toward, middle school, high school, young adult, with things like Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club, Goonies. Again, television shows. Music was very, very diverse. You had, pop, rock, girl groups, boy groups. Rap becomes very popular in the 1980s. So it was just a very interesting time culturally. So the 1990s, we have a lot of things that are female first. We have the first female attorney general, which is Janet Reno, this lady right here. First female health of human services, Donna Shalala. The second woman to join the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. military policy in the 1990s and 1980s and 1990s was don't ask, don't tell. And what that means is if you are gay in the military, we don't want to know. You can be gay, but just don't tell anybody. So you could not be, out and proud in the military during this time period. In 1993, a lot of stuff happens. It's a very eventful year. There is a terrorist organization that bombs the World Trade Center, the same World Trade Center that collapsed in 2001, killed 6 people. And one of the women there was a woman also injured because they drove a van underneath the complex because it had a whole underground complex where you could get off the subway and things like that. So they drove a van full of explosives under there and detonated it. And that's what killed all these people. Now, there was a woman that was injured in the first attack in 1993, and she was wheelchair bound because of her injuries. And she went back to work in the World Trade Center, and unfortunately, because, again, she was wheelchair bound, she did not make it out of the towers when they fell in 2001. Hillary Clinton was First Lady, and she she wanted to have a health care plan, which was basically what is now Obamacare. So, it wasn't an original, it wasn't, something that Obama had come. It was a long-range plan with the Democratic Party. The Brady Bill was a bipartisan piece of legislation, and this started background checks for guns. So before the Brady Bill, you didn't have to have like a background check. Let's see, NAFTA started in 1994, and this is North American Free Trade Association, which basically what it did was it made it where American companies could send manufacturing to other countries cheaper. And so this is really going to hurt American manufacturing, unfortunately. The Violent Crime Control Bill is also known as the 1994 Crime Bill. And what it did was it had very harsh punishments for people who were accused of crimes because this was the war on drugs that was happening in this time period. And so you had a large amount of, it predominantly affected African Americans, unfortunately, with this particular crime bill. Oklahoma City bombing took place, and so this guy right here was Timothy McVeigh. He was a disillusioned Gulf War veteran, and he and his co-conspirator Terry Nichols filled a van full of fertilizer and detonated it and killed well over 100 people, and Timothy McVeigh got the death penalty, and his co-conspirator got consecutive life sentences, so he'll never get out of prison. The election of 1996 was between Bill Clinton, Republican, Bill Clinton, Democrat, Bob Dole, Republican, and Ross Perot, Independent, and Bill Clinton does win the 1996 election. Now his second term, he had a lot of problems going on, unfortunately, and that's the running theme of the 80s and 90s. Reagan's first term was great. His second term, he had problems. Bush only served 1 term. Clinton had first term was great, second term, a whole lot of problems. And so Paula Jones was a woman that worked for Clinton while he was governor of Arkansas. She files a lawsuit alleging that he sexually harassed her while she was employed by him. In January of 1998, Monica Lewinsky says, hey, he also sexually harassed me. Monica Lewinsky was a White House intern. And he denied that he said, I did not have any kind of relationship with this woman. And he is impeached for his relationship with Monica Lewinsky because he lied under oath, which is perjury. Meaning, if you put your hand on the Bible and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, and then they catch you in a lie, that's perjury. It's a felony. That's the only thing that can remove you from, the presidency, the House, the Senate, you have to commit a felony. And they know that he committed a felony because Miss Lewinsky kept a dress that had the president's DNA that implicated him in a relationship, an inappropriate relationship. But he was impeached in the House but saved in the Senate, meaning he didn't actually get removed from office. And that is the end of the 80s and 90s.